When I was a young lad growing up in one of the coal mining valleys in South Wales, one of my great pleasures with my much loved scruffy dog was to go for a walk up the mountain. And some 60 years later, I still love coming to places like this. We're in Llanwynno forest, just above Ynysybwl and Pontypridd, and it really is a most delightful area. And what I love about these places is that you can swap the streets and houses of the urban environments and literally within a matter of minutes drive up or walk up, and you can then find views that are absolutely astonishing, and this place is no exception. So much of the history that we know about this area is drawn from the work of Thomas. He lived between 1843 and 1890, and he was known by his bardic title of Llanwynno. He wrote Hanes Ploeth Llanwynno, the history of Llanwynno, in 1874. Even though industry reigned supreme in the valleys for over 250 years, and there the passage of time was measured by the works Guto, here in these upland areas, time was measured by the agricultural calendar. This is an area of small farms and holdings, and there's a great deal of evidence still visible about the lives of the people who've lived here over the past 400 or 500 years or so. I just love features like this, these glorious stone walls made out of the local Pennant sandstone. And I think it speaks volumes for the skill of the agricultural community that not only did you have to grow your crops and look after your animals, etc., but you also had to turn your hand to building these wonderful dry stone walls. And to build a dry stone wall of this height really takes some skill. It's when I visit these wonderful, lovely lanes that I start to get a sense of what life might have been like in the 18th and 19th centuries. And goodness me, motorways and supermarkets seem so far, far away. But to get a slightly deeper insight into what life was like in these rural communities, this is a really great place to visit. This is Llanwynno, which dates from 1616, and we know that from the date stone, although it's likely that it's much earlier. It's a classic example of a Glamorgan longhouse. Of course, it's changed over the centuries, but the basic layout is still very much the same. That is, accommodation for the human beings on the left-hand side up the slope of the hill, and then accommodation for the animals or the livestock down the bottom of the hill. And its location, tucked into the side of the slope, of course, provided very important weather protection. So, both humans and animals shared this long rectangular complex. And there was an obvious benefit to that, because all the muck from the animals here in the lower part could be swept out and brought together to form what some commentators described as the farmer's bank balance, that is, the manure heap. In these upland zones with their thin, acidic topsoils, good fertilizer was absolutely essential, because that could be the difference between eating or going hungry. Some of these early longhouses actually had central open hearths, but this later development has this large fireplace and this huge chimney stack. These are sometimes called rooms within rooms, because it meant that you could actually get in close to the fire. They'd sometimes have chairs actually in the inglenook here, and of course it was a good place to keep warm. And another delightful feature is this wonderful curved staircase. This gave access to what was called the crog loft. I suppose we'd describe it in modern terms as the mezzanine, the sleeping area that was once above the main living room. So all domestic needs were catered for, including this wonderful double-seater loo. So if you're in the middle of an interesting conversation, why discontinue the discourse just to meet the needs of nature? But of course, look carefully and we can see that the holes are of different sizes. One for the adult, one for the kids. I really just love it when we get an insight into the thoughts, the minds of people in our history. This is just wonderful. Not my own, my native land. That's a quote, or rather a misquote, from the poem by Sir Walter Scott, Patriotism, that was written in 1806. And the detailing here is just superb. 1860, W. Jones, well, there we are, June 1860. We can put different interpretations upon this, because the actual quote is, "This my own, my native land." So, was this a statement by W. Jones, who was a tenant farmer, and was it a little protest against his landlord, or was it just simply a misquotation? This is a very pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to find this cafe, Guto, which is run by volunteers, right here in the middle of Llanwynno forest. These are really delicious Welsh cakes and a most welcome cup of coffee, believe me. And right next door to the cafe is this delightful outward bound centre. And even this has a connection with St. Gwynno, because it's called Llanwynno, which means Gwynno's land. Exploring this area revealed so much fascinating history. And indeed, all we have to do is to just sweep our eyes across these acres and acres of conifers to realise just how much they have changed the visual and physical nature of this landscape. The Forestry Commission was established in 1919, really as a reaction to the phenomenal demands for timber during the First World War. And so, areas of land all across parts of Britain were acquired and planted. This was a process that intensified during the 1950s with the increase of technology and innovations. Handheld chainsaws, for instance, and heavy-duty machinery then enabled previously unplantable ground to be planted. Wow, this is such a wonderful surprise. I never expected to see an interior in this marvellous church. This is a very ancient church. It's actually dedicated to St. Gwynno, who was a pupil in Llanwynno. And probably it was dedicated, we don't know exactly, but sometime after the Great Plague of 547. Like so many of our ancient churches, of course, the Victorians and the Edwardians got their hands on it and changed so many aspects. But regardless, I think this is a very nice example of a late Victorian church in its own right. But what I find absolutely fascinating, there are so many reminders of the early history of this church. And these are a couple of really good examples. But I'm going to have to get my glasses on to read the information here. These two stones, the oldest gravestone in the church that dates from the 17th century. And it's inscribed, "The body of Christian Pitts, wife of James Pitt, Gent, died 4th of June AD 1667 in 42nd year. I really enjoy the way that history can compress itself. And here's a very nice example again. This is a benefaction which dates from 1678, and it's providing £5 to the poor of the parish. Well, I understand that that money is still distributed to this very day. It's the fine details that I find so fascinating about this church. And here we have another couple of really nice examples. This incised early Christian cross, and of course the carving here depicting a fish, because this place was so very important. It was on the pilgrim route, of course, to the holy shrine at Penrhys. Whenever we come to old churches, we have so much help from the people who know these places intimately. And today, Elaine and Keith, the church vergers, have showed us so much, including this little treasure, this bell. Now, there's lots of stories associated with bells here in the church, because it's said that neighbouring parishioners from Llanwynno took a fancy to the bell here and came one night and stole it. And then there are stories about that the bell was never retrieved, or that they threw it away, or that it was once again returned to the church here. So take your pick, but that's the beauty of coming to these ancient historic places. Well, I suppose we all want to leave our mark in this world, and this door is very lovely, full of initials, inscriptions, etc. And we can only wonder about who are the people who came here. Did they come for a walk to this lovely part of the world? Were they worshippers or whatever? But it's full of information. Here we have people from 1945. Here's Ivor Rowlands of 1941. And here's KF and EB of 1926. I wonder if they came here during that summer of strikes. Now, there are stories aplenty to the gentleman buried beneath this memorial. This records Griffith Morgan, of course, better known as Guto Nyth Bran, who was born in 1700. And if all the legends and stories about this man are true, well, he really was an athlete of exceptional talent. I was looking online for information about Guto Nyth Bran, and I happened to come across a smashing film on YouTube made by Hare Primary School. And in it, the children there tell all the stories about this remarkable athlete, including the fact that he raced from his home to Pontypridd and back before a kettle boiled, and how at the age of 37 he ran a race 12 miles in 53 minutes, and then somebody slapped him on the back to congratulate him, and he died of heart failure. One of the legends associated with Guto Nyth Bran is that he could run down a hare, and this sculpture commemorates the fact. It also says that if you look through this hole, look directly across into the churchyard, you can see his grave. Perfectly true. Well, after all those tales of running and exercise, I'm feeling absolutely exhausted. So I think it's time now for a glass or two in the Bryn Ffynnon. And what a better way to end the film.